UFC's Apex this weekend at lightweight. It's a get back, get right type of fight. We have King Bobby Green looking to make it a big time comeback, and he's lost 2 straight. He's going to be taking on a man who has worn Julian Erosa's shoes. I'm talking about Jared Flash Gordon, a couple of guys that got absolutely just... I don't even know what word to use. They got absolutely screwed, I guess, by the judges. And for Jared Gordon, his last time out against Paddy Pimblett, I went to MMA Decisions. Dan Urban of Couchside Judges scored the fight 29-28 for Pimblett, while 12 other media members scored it 29-28 Gordon, 11 scored it 30-27 Gordon. On the rewatch, I scored it 30-27 Gordon, which is what I scored it originally. I have no idea how Jared Gordon didn't win that fight by those judges' accounts, but when you have a look at it, Douglas Crosby and Ron McCarthy scored round 1 and round 2 for Paddy Pimblett, who was outstruck and outgrappled in that one. But regardless of what happened, Matt, Jared Gordon isn't going out there and fighting a much lesser opponent. He's fighting somebody that's of that caliber, just outside of the top 15.
What I really like about this fight is both guys are getting a very different opponent from what they normally face, because Gordon and Bobby Green are sort of those outside the top 15 gatekeepers, right? You're a prospect on your way up. Jared Gordon's a very well-rounded mixed martial artist who has great cardio. That's a great opponent for any of these high-level prospects to face.
He's got a good chin, too.
And on the flip side, Bobby Green has great boxing combinations. We all know how talented he is as a striker, but also has some obvious flaws in his games, too, that were, hey, if you are sort of that top-tier prospect, you are going to be able to pass it. That's why I like this fight for both guys. They're sort of getting out of that mold, and they're both getting into sort of the general lightweight division and facing off against each other, because I have a hard time with this matchup, especially with where the odds are, because Bobby Green is a bigger favorite. We'll talk about that more later, but it is interesting because both guys are normally fighting prospects, and we don't really know how they match up against other well-rounded mixed martial artists in the lightweight division, but it's interesting to see how Gordon has progressed throughout his career, and it's why I'm surprised to see he hasn't been given the respect from the odds makers, because Gordon earlier on was much more of a wrestler than he was a boxer. It was get his guy to the ground and pound, try to rough them up, get them tired, and look for the finish later on in fights. But what's the biggest part of his game that has grown lately? His boxing. It's become a lot more crisp, a lot more compact, and that's why I'm surprised he hasn't been given more respect, because I do think he can hold his own in some, not all of course. I think he can hold his own in some boxing exchanges with a guy like Bobby Green, but I think this is going to be a really fun fight, because neither guy's going to become a much lesser version of themselves in the third round that they are in the first round. We should get 3 very close, very competitive rounds.
No, I mean, a couple of guys that the cardio never wanes. Bobby Green can really rely on the fact that he did lose to Fiziev, but in the third round, he was beating 100%. Him and he looked really good with his combinations. The awkward part about the rewatch of Green versus Dober, does Bobby Green win that first round? 110%. Every single person that they brought onto the commentary, whether it was the 3 on the panel or the coach that they brought in, it was, hey, Bobby Green, this unorthodox defense, this is great. I mean, he's keeping his hands down, he's doing the shoulder roll, and then a big right hand lands for Drew Dober, and then he falls like a sack of potatoes. And Bobby Green protested the stoppage at the time. I thought Keith Peterson did a great job. Some people didn't like Keith Peterson's stoppage of Bozer and Kutsalaba last weekend, but against Bobby Green, it was a pretty darn good stoppage because it was the second right hand that really did drop him after he already got wobbled. But when you look at a guy like Green, the last 2 fights, I'm going to say somewhat forgivable. The fight against Islam Makhachev, what's going to happen? You take a main event on short notice, that happens. The fight against Drew Dober, I called it. It was the right that landed first, then it was the left hook that dropped him and gets the finish. Before that, wins over Nasrat Hakbras, Ala Quinta, and then the Fiziev fight. That's a 5-on-in for Bobby Green. For Jared Gordon, who's 7-5 in the UFC, he had a fight of the night against Joaquim Silva, if you can remember that one, a 2-rounder where he gets finished. But Danny Chavez a win, Joe Selecki split decision win. He loses to Grant Dawson, beats Leonardo Santos, and did he ever? My guy. And then he loses to Paddy Pimblett, but that was very controversial. You look at it, Matt, like again, Bobby Green's carrying that torch of guys that have fought with Strikeforce and Affliction. Bobby Green, that Affliction card that Green fought on, where he lost by submission to Dan Lozon, was co-main evented by the guy that lost to Jake Gyllenhaal a few weeks ago.
Jay Huron? Nice.
Jay Huron. So Bobby Green, he was on that Affliction card.
I'm definitely watching the new Roadhouse. Like, when I thought Ronda Rousey was the main character, no way. I love me some Jake Gyllenhaal. Nightcrawler?
Hot Ones?
The Zodiac? Like, he's been in some great movies.
Yeah. prisoners, Jake Gyllenhaal. But Matt, when you do look at a matchup
dark,
like this,
but it was good.
Bobby Green, I mean, with the shoulder roll, the speed hasn't eluded him even at 36. At 34, Jared Gordon's only rounded out into a better martial artist, a guy that spent a lot of time in Philly, in Rufus Sport, and then, of course, at Killcliff FC. Lots of great training partners. We've already touched on that with the Killcliff FC fighters that are on this card, including in this division. I'm talking about one, Christos Giagos, the Spartan. But when you look at a matchup like this, Matt, Bobby Green's fared well against wrestlers in the past. They've always put him up against wrestlers, and he's had good takedown defense. He almost does like a power plant stance, like a guitar player, putting his legs way out there.
His feet are down even when he defends punches, so it is a natural position for him to defend takedowns. Like, unless you're Habib or Islam, it's difficult to take him down.
I put it as Icon MMA, but if it's Pinnacle, if it's any of those gyms in South Florida, Bobby Green's, or sorry, I guess it'd be South Florida, jumping jeepers, Northern California.
There we go.
If you look at it for Bobby Green, training with guys like Jamal Emmers, like at the time, former bantamweight stud, Darian Caldwell over with Bellator, how the mighty have fallen. But when you look at a guy like Bobby Green, he's rounded himself into such a good fighter. Again, he is a pretty big favorite in the matchup. He is 14-11-1 under the Strikeforce Affliction UFC banner. We have a look at the Topology votes, Matt. Surprise us there to you. I'm going to say over under 70% Bobby Green.
I think they'll be over.
I think they're going to be over. They're way over. 831 total votes, 82% Green, 76% by decision. For the 18% that have Gordon, 74% by decision. Matt, the fans have Green. Green is a big favorite in this fight.
It's closer than the odds would have.
Do you have Bobby Green in the matchup?
I do, but ever so slightly. If I were to set the odds, and I know it doesn't matter, but I'd have Bobby Green at like a minus 175, 155, like in between that range, exactly. Because I do favor his volume, and I do like the fact that I've never really seen him get convincingly out-grappled by a guy like Jared Gordon. I've seen him get out-grappled, but it's by higher levels of opposition than Gordon. And I like that Gordon has been able to improve his boxing, but I still don't know if it's at the level of a guy like Bobby Green. So I'll favor Bobby Green with the volume. And let me say this too, because it has to be mentioned. Bobby Green's mentioned like, retirement and stuff like that. Bobby Green says that before and after every single fight he's had for the last 5 years. So I don't put a ton of stock into that. I do have Green ever so slightly, but I think this is a really fun fight.
Yeah, when you do have a look at it for Bobby Green, you talk about the wrestlers. Thiago Moises is one of those guys that had some success in their fight. Clay Guida had a little bit of success. Lando Venata was able to mix it up a bit, but by and large, Bobby Green's winning fights against wrestlers other than the fight of the night against Lando Venata in the first stanza. 4 fight of the nights, 2 performance bonuses for Green. I like Green. I mean, every single time that Dober was coming in, he was catching him with the right hook and he was able to bounce out of the way. So I do like Green with a variety of shots, but we did see that chin compromise the last time out. Yeah. Maybe that's going to be a story as the career goes on and as it gets a little bit later into the twilight of that career for a guy like King Bobby Green. But in this one, both of us going with Green. Jared Gordon, though, I mean, my gosh, you talk about a guy that's well-rounded and can mix all of his martial arts. And again, the shoe is on that foot. Go back and watch that Julian Rosa Paddy Pimblett fight if you know what I'm talking about. It's a big-time fight, Matt, and it really puts us over into the 3 that remain on this card. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.